Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Progressive American. This bonus episode is the result of an interview I had with the leftist streamer and YouTuber, the Kavernacle. I hope you enjoy it and have a wonderful day. So, first of all, I'd just like to welcome anyone and everyone to the Progressive American. We are live with the Kavernacle. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so if any of you over from my channel or Twitter and stuff, you guys know me. But yeah, I'm the Kavernacle, make videos on a whole range of topics. I'd say the best way to describe me is a channel that covers internet politics mixed with like social commentary. My background in education, I have a history degree and I have a master's in international relations. So that is why I love this stuff so much. And yeah, looking forward to a good conversation with Connor about basically why I started my channel, but hopefully get into some political issues as well that we can discuss.
Yeah, and I was rather pleased to find that you had a history degree as well. I recently just got mine, historians unite, I suppose. So I wanted
This
to,
year, you finished.
yeah, just finished. Well, I technically had it shipped to my
Yeah,
address,
yeah.
just this year, but I finished it last semester. So I just wanted to start off relatively
Oh,
simple,
nice.
and try and ask like, what made you want to get into this kind of commentary? Because online commentary tends to be a bit chaotic, sometimes vitriolic, and what made you want to, start your own channel, talk about these complicated issues that you think are central and
Yeah.
important to you?
Yeah. So I guess I'll go into the backstory that maybe a lot of people don't know as much because I haven't really spoke about it. So like an exclusive scoop here. So basically, I've always been pretty opinionated, like at school and stuff. And then in my first year of university, I started writing for both. I think in the first year, I just wrote for the entertainment paper website at my school, and this was like game reviews, TV show reviews, and stuff like that. And I really enjoyed it. And then I started writing politics stuff for my uni's politics paper in my second year. So I think that was October 2015, and I wrote something about U.S. mass shooting, like as a culture, and I got
Mm.
like really good feedback, and I just really enjoyed that. So I kept writing stuff. And then in third year, I became like I forgot what my role was, but I worked on the print magazine as part of the team. I think I was the editorial assistant to the entertainment editor, but I just did the gaming section. So I was basically it was pretty cool like magazine. I got to interview the guy who makes the Lego games at the Warner Brothers Studios where they make the Harry Potter films. I got to free copies of games like Pro Evolution Soccer and Rainbow Six. I really enjoyed that stuff while I was writing the politics at the same time. And then there was also a radio station at my uni, and you could make your own radio show. And I just thought, like, I really want to do this. No one has one, so why don't I make my own radio show? And I think I don't know if this is like revisionist history, but I have a vivid memory of walking with my girlfriend. We talk about the name of the radio show, and I thought, what I actually use is different. But then I thought of the Kavernacle, and I was like, this is so smart. And one thing I won't be revealing is why it's called the Kavernacle, but let's just say it's a play on the tabernacle. As someone who was raised Catholic, I thought it'd be quite funny just because at this time I was more focused on like atheism and atheist content and talking points. So then I didn't call my radio show the Kavernacle. People call me Tommy Cahill online because of my Reddit, so let's just go with that being my real name, even though it's not. So I called it Tommy's Podium. That was the radio show. And the Kavernacle became a YouTube channel. And what I did with the radio broadcast is I would upload them to my YouTube channel. Now, something not everyone knows about me either, I probably won't name drop him, but my brother is a relatively successful YouTuber. He has over like 1 million subs and stuff. He didn't at the time. I think he had about 30,000 when I was starting off. And then so he helped me a lot because he gave me a camera, he gave me a computer, like his old equipment. He showed me how to edit. So when I came home from university, he helped me out with that stuff. How I got my real start really was me and him did like a little video together while he was relatively small, just talking about like various issues. Um, and that's kind of the weird thing that happened because we started with that, and then I started making political content, which wasn't his content. So his viewers kind of fell off a bit. But I'm not going to dwell on the evolution of the channel too much unless you want to talk about that. But basically, why I started it was because I thought I had a good point of view. I feel like I know history really well, and I also know politics very well. And I started the channel before I did my master's degree as well. And I had that certain points of view in atheism and other things like that. So basically, I felt like I could offer something, not in a big-headed way. I also wanted people to like. I know this might not be what everyone says. I wanted people to respect my opinion, and I'd always enjoyed the feedback and discussions with people after I wrote things. And I just wanted that with YouTube, and I never really thought about it as like a job, and it is pretty much my job now. But we can talk more about the evolution if you want. But yeah, that's the short of it. That's how the Kavernacle came to be, and by I think January 2018, I started taking it more seriously, and March 2019, I started taking it very, very seriously in the sense that I would upload like twice a week, every week or something.
Yeah, I noticed you upload really consistently. I'm impressed. Like it takes a lot of effort to make videos and stuff like that. So yeah, props to you on that. But I also think it's kind of interesting because I also wrote in opinion articles and stuff like that. I got my start in political commentary. And ended up actually becoming the opinion editor for the college newspaper at my college.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting how to some degree there are similarities in that you started off with your commentary as it related to writing in magazines. Initially, it was more like interviews and stuff, and gaming, but you ended up developing your own tint of things. Whereas I was pretty fervently in the whole let's see where this goes and let's develop a skill set. But I'm curious why you thought YouTube was the best method, like for you, because a lot of times, and I'm sure you're quite used to this at this point, a lot of online commentary tends to be vitriolic, to put it lightly. But you seem to, as you described earlier, you seem to consider the feedback one of the blessings of your work. Is that a fair representation?
Yeah. So the thing is, I think secretly, and maybe people don't want to admit this, we're all seeking validation for our views. Like we want people to respect them even if they don't agree with them. So by vitriolic, I would say when you say stuff like that, it makes me think of the Twitch community a bit more, and like Twitch streamers and like the debate culture, which is something while I'm aware of it, I'm not interested in really getting into. But in general, YouTube, yeah, it's accessible. I've been doxxed by Nazis. I've had all this really like there's loads of, if you want to go on to like 4chan or Kiwi Farms, there's loads of threads and stuff saying awful stuff about me. Weird racist abuse because apparently I'm not white, according to some Nazis. I get a lot of anti-Semitic abuse. I'm not Jewish. I've never said anything like about having Jewish ancestors, but there's extremely racist people. But that's because of the content I tackle is kind of like anti-fascist in a lot of ways. So I do get a lot of abuse, and I'd say the one thing is you've got to have a very thick skin because you've got to take the good with the bad. Because I get abuse on my comments every single day. I also get people like streaming my videos while like saying awful crap about me and my content and stuff. But I think the big thing with content creation as well, and I like the validation obviously, but obviously I also get probably an equal amount of hate. It's that you've got to be strong in your own beliefs and kind of realize, I guess I don't believe in free will and I believe in like social conditioning of people. But when people have such a knee-jerk response to me, a lot of the times it's because of their upbringing and stuff. And maybe what I'm saying is so like outrageous to them because of this. So for example, I made a video on Rhodesia and I called them Rhodey Boos. And I've been getting hate comments on that for about the last 2 weeks, because what happens normally is your fans will comment in the first 3 or 4 days. As the video grows more and more, you get way more hate comments, and they keep coming and coming. So most of the time, my older videos, I'm just getting hate comments, and they're saying loads of stuff to me, and these people, some of them are from Zimbabwe or from Rhodesia, so I try not to let it get to me. Some days it does get to you a bit more. The worst ones is when people really mischaracterize me and spread it around. Like I had some guy spamming like all my channels saying I was an anti-Semite or something. This is because I've been talking about Israel lately. And he was saying like, I'm a leftist from Germany and like what you're saying is completely disgusting. And I don't know if this guy was a troll or not, or just a bit unhinged, but that kind of got to me because I'm just getting angry because I'm just like, I don't want to respond to you because if you're a troll, I don't want to give you what you want. But at the same time, I want to, it's hard because I don't know if you spend much time arguing with people online. When you're having a text argument,
Yep.
you cannot get across your point. You also cannot really sometimes make the other person back down is a big one, even if you are totally in the right in the argument. So that is something that constantly frustrates me, and I try and cool off. And I think I'm getting better as I'm treating this more like as a job. I think I'm getting better at just being like, don't respond. Like lately, what I've been doing a lot is writing out the comment and then just deleting it, and then it's like, no, don't do that. Don't respond to that. Don't give them the satisfaction. Don't argue. Just you have your platform. For me, I'm trying to think now. Have my platform. Put your opinion out there. Read good faith criticism and people being nice and wanting to discuss the issues, and try and ignore the trolls and awful comments. And I think that's the hardest thing about being a content creator, is trying to find the balance where, and some things as well, because I cover a lot of international politics as well, sometimes I can doubt myself. I'm like, these people, like, I don't think that people know it more than me all the time, but I'm just like, am I like the best person to talk about this stuff? But I just feel like I never claim to be like the biggest authority on like Greek politics or African politics, but I think I try and cover it in a way where I link it to an overall theme. For me, like the Boo series was about racist dead states and people who look back at them and, you know, talk about revisionist history towards them. And I don't think I need to be an expert, like a total expert on Rhodesia and Imperial Japan to discuss these things. So yeah, but that's the long and short of it. We can talk about the Twitch stuff a bit later, but yeah, the vitriol you get, mainly not from other YouTubers, it's mainly from commenters. But I do have other YouTubers who have made videos on me, and when you get dogpiled by a big creator, which I did when I had about 7K, I think, like 2 big right-wing channels made like whole videos on me, that is like a bit hard to take when you just scroll, like every time you refresh, it's just like 10 more hate comments and stuff. So that's not a nice feeling, but it's all like a learning experience where I think like I can cope with all that stuff a lot better.
Yeah, I've had a bit of experience with some of that as well. Not necessarily on YouTube, but on Twitter, because a lot of the way I started out was I ended up writing on Medium and writing my own content regarding those kinds of things. I think I wrote an article talking about the way red baiting has been used in America, particularly to the detriment of immigrant communities and Jewish people as well, because a lot of anti-communism also is laced with some degree of anti-Semitism. And it was a republish.
I'd say a high degree of anti-Semitism.
Yeah, very much so.
Like it's very embedded. But yeah, sorry, you're going your medium stuff in the direction.
The cultural Bolshevism stuff and the cultural Marxism stuff is like old school anti-Semitism. But one of the things that I had an interesting experience with was when Lauren Southern had been commenting about AOC, and you know how like the right dogpiled her, saying she wasn't at the Capitol when it was hit, and not realizing that there were tunnels to her office from the Capitol and whatnot. And I had commented something to the effect of like, well, you don't actually care about this or something like that. And then she actually responded and all of her fans came dogpiling in. And it was just like, well, there we go.
I've had that as well.
Yeah, that's never a fun thing.
The best thing for me, like I've become a lot better on Twitter with this stuff, because what I do is, and if anyone's watching who's tried to message me on Twitter, the only people who can message me are people who follow me. The only notifications I get are from comments of people who follow me. So that really filters out all the mentions. Like if there are right-wing trolls like mentioning me all the time, I don't see it. And I think that's the best way to cope with it, or you'll just drive yourself a bit insane, because you just like, you cannot change people's mind. People don't act in good faith. So like, it's more, for me, it's not about like creating a safe space. Like I'm fine to engage with people who do not believe in the same politics as me, but I feel like social media sometimes amplifies a sort of here's my following against yours, and I'm going to unleash this against you to make you feel like you're wrong. But it's only because I've had a platform. I've had like Sargon of Akkad like quote tweet me, and like some other people as well, like even like people like the Quartering and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And then your comments are just filled with like loads of like trolling and hate and stuff. So yeah, the best thing, I've also, to that point as well, I just started banning people from my YouTube channel now. Like if I get a comment saying like long live Rhodesia or like some other shit about like the Confederacy or the Wehrmacht and stuff,
Oh boy.
just ban straight away. And even my Discord, like we've been getting better at it. Like someone just joined the other day, just had Oswald Mosley, who was like the leading British fascist in the 30s. That's his profile picture, and he joins, and I was like, do you think you're gonna get away with this? I'm gonna ban you straight away.
Well,
but it is hard. It is hard sometimes because but I think one thing that's been good this year covering the fascist stuff is I become very, very like alert to maybe obscure fascist symbols like a Boer Republic flag from South Africa, or like just weird different symbols and flags from like Norse mythology or German mythology. So like that's the only good thing that's made me more aware and able to deal with this stuff, I think.
Yeah, and I think part of the thing that is always interesting is you can have an open dialogue with people, but it depends upon good faith and an agreed upon set of circumstances involving that debate. Like for example, and even if like we disagreed on something here, we agreed upon a set understanding of what we're doing here. Like we had that set out. So I think a lot of people online will try, particularly debate bros or what have you, will say things like, oh, you don't want to engage in the marketplace of ideas, but at the same time, you also have things where you're like, you have your freedom of association, if you want to put it that way. You get to decide who you deal with and who you don't. But speaking of criticism, I noticed recently you had been tweeting and talking about how some commenters, particularly liberals, specifically David Pakman, you mentioned how he had not done a lot in discussing the Israel conflict. And I listened to him a little bit. I like his podcast overall, but I was curious about some of your more in-depth criticisms of some of his commentary and what you expect from other commenters to do better that you would like to see.
So I don't consider David Pakman like a leftist at all. For me, especially coming from the UK, he's at best a centrist, and maybe in the American context, he's more like centre-left liberal. But for him, his comments about it before he was kind of forced into by his community to making a video on it, he's basically saying like, it happens all the time. You know, my people don't really want to watch that. And it's like, you cover politics. Like, I think he uploads 3 times a day, and I think there's an hour video. I don't know if it's maybe you can enlighten me. Does he upload an hour video and then upload the segments as individuals, or is there an hour video and then 3 other videos on top of that?
From my understanding from his channel is that he uploads a stream, like an hour-long, not a stream, an hour-long podcast, which is the daily thing.
Yeah.
And then segments from those podcasts are broken up into separate videos, because if it just did a stream, it would be like a wide variety of topics in one video, and I don't think he prefers to do that. So yeah.
Okay. So he does an hour a day, right? So I make 3 videos a week, and I think I've talked about Israel since Wednesday last week. I've made 4 videos on Israel, and I only upload 3 times a week. And I also talked about it in 2 streams, right? Because it's the main topic in politics. Not only that, it's just gross what's happening. And also for a guy like David Pakman, if you claim to understand politics, right? He makes, how many videos does he make on Trump still? Videos all the time. If you claim to understand politics, and you know, David has in the past supported Israel a lot. I've watched some of his older videos about saying how wrong it was for Black Lives Matter, the organization, to support like the Palestinians, say that Israel was racist towards black people, which, you know, we know it is because of the way they often treat Ethiopian Jews and stuff. So his bias is very telling on that stuff, but also, you know, just the ignoring this stuff. But in terms of let's talk about the Trump context, right? So there's probably never been a more pro-Israeli president than Donald Trump. And it's not because, you know, Donald Trump loves Israel the most. And although, Jared Kushner had investments in like companies that, worked on settlements and stuff, this isn't a guy who just suddenly loves the Israelis, but it's because probably his strategists are saying, right, the white evangelicals absolutely love Israel. They think it's the key to Armageddon in the end times, so support them no matter what. Netanyahu loves this. They named it like a town after him, the Golan Heights and stuff.
Yeah.
And you can see how much, compared to Obama, that Trump has emboldened Netanyahu's agenda, right? So what has been happening in the last month or so in Israel is the culmination of Netanyahu, and there's other factors as well, like him wanting to stay in power, but it's the culmination of a country that now feels like it's untouchable and it can do what it wants. Like that's the big thing about Israel with me and the Israeli military's actions. It's so brazen. It's in front of the global media and they don't care. They still do it. And I'm hoping, and it feels like there is a change in this. But for David Pakman to act like this is just a little like sparring thing between Hamas and Israel, it happens every 2 years. That's not what's happening. It's the worst escalation of tension since 2014, right?
Yeah.
If we were talking about like Hezbollah firing a couple rockets randomly one day, or Hamas maybe randomly firing some rockets, that's a different story. We're talking about, flattening tower blocks and everything like that. So someone like David Pakman, to me, that just shows he only cares about his sponsors. Sorry if you can hear a dog.
You're good. You're
as
good.
well. Yeah, okay. He only cares about his sponsors, but his considerations in not covering this stuff is that he'll either be cancelled by the woke people who follow him. I don't know if that's a consideration he feels, but also economic considerations as well. It's controversial. It shouldn't be. It's controversial to talk about Palestinian rights and what Israel is doing. But I'm hoping, and also that the thing with David Pakman, his defense is like, my audience don't like that. If you type in David Pakman Israel, he's made loads of videos on Israel. Loads of videos. So for him to suddenly be like, I'm this liberal streamer, video maker who covers politics 24/7. I have nothing to say about Israel, even though the US have just sold they agreed like a $700 million new deal for weapons.
I think it was.
So the US is like instrumental in this regime's power as well. And we're going to act like that's not an American political issue, especially with the culmination of what Trump did and how I feel like it factors into this stuff. So for people like David Pakman specifically, I don't see him as like my ally and stuff. I just see him as a voice who covers news. He's like a news anchor. I'm not going to expect like some radical commentary. And people like that, I feel like the only thing they're good for is being an anti-Trump voice. And now Trump is gone, I don't really think they have too much use. Like, if you want to stay a bit informed in some political issues, then great. But even compare that to something like the Young Turks, which people sometimes lump together. You have someone like Anna Kasparian who like goes on the Jacobin and stuff. Clearly someone whose political views have become more left as a result of Trump. Even Cenk Uygur, who still says he's a capitalist and stuff. So that's opinion, really. Like, these guys have an opinion, and credit to like people like Young Turks who are more liberal for really standing up on causes like, Palestine, for example, where someone like David Pakman acts like he can just not talk about it, despite talking about it in the past and everything, because he feels like it's contentious or people won't like his opinion. So people like David Pakman, again, I don't consider leftists and stuff. And that's my main criticism for people like him. And I think there's a space in like liberal left YouTube for like a lot of different people. But, he's meant to be this voice of reason, but can't bring himself to say this stuff. And just ignoring the topic, flat out ignoring it, speaks a lot. Because, if you're someone in politics right now and you don't talk about this stuff and you claim to be like someone who cares about humanity, human rights and stuff, I think, it's massively suspect. And your motives for not covering it isn't that you don't have an opinion. It's, something else, I feel.
Yeah, and I have 2 points here. On the one hand, I think a lot of Americans unfortunately don't consider foreign policy to be all that important. So I think part of it is, to your point, that some of it will be like the controversial issue. But I also think David Pakman and other commenters, even though I am a bit of a fan of Pakman's overall commentary, I think his discussions surrounding Israel are symptomatic of a broader problem with Americans not caring about the foreign world or the globe, really, in it. Like, why should we care? We're America, sort of thing. And considering, like, in your interactions with American commentators online, has that been some of the attitudes you picked up on, or is that just me?
No, I suppose I have a lot of criticism for like Western streamers in general. So Vosh is like the biggest. I'd say he's the biggest streamer apart from Hassan. But he's constantly had like very ignorant takes about different things. I don't think he's a bad guy. He recently raised like hundreds of thousands of dollars for Palestinian charities. Like that's a great thing to do, and clearly has an awareness to an extent. But even he was he was debating someone about the Uyghur like genocide and stuff, and he was saying, "You're awful, you're a genocide denier, blah blah blah." And then he says, "Oh yeah, the US dabbed on North Korea in the Korean War," and it's like, do you know that like the US killed like 20% of North Korea's population in that war through like carpet bombing? And you're taking like the moral high ground on genocide and saying like, bragging someone that the US dabbed on another country like that. So, but if he knew that, do I think he would say it? I don't think he would say it, but like he was ignorant in that, and he's talking about, a lot of what people talk about is black nationalism is another one. They equate black nationalism with like Louis Farrakhan and other stuff, when it's not like that. And whether you agree with it or not, it doesn't matter. That's just an unfair characterization. That's black separatism. But black nationalism is something different, which I spoke about as like a response video to him. So he's not even the worst example. There's many other people. I think sometimes, like, I think there's another streamer who came out and my take on why the US shouldn't leave Afghanistan or something. It's like, and this is like a young guy with no background, like educational background in this stuff, and you're just going to hop on stream and talk about this stuff based on like 10 minutes, an hour of reading stuff. And the thing, what I would say is, people in America, and from discussions on stream, it seems like you're just not educated about the wider world. Going back to like your younger years and stuff, like it's not necessarily your fault. Like I've had. This is one that blows my mind. I've had to talk so much about Ireland as like an Irish person, like Irish background, on my stream with Americans who say they don't know anything about Ireland, like at all, like the Troubles, the Good Friday Agreement. And you can maybe make the argument, well, it's Ireland, it's a small country, but how many Americans claim to be Irish?
Yeah.
Joe Biden is Catholic Irish, JFK, obviously. Bill Clinton was instrumental in that process. Yet a lot of Americans don't even know there's two countries in Ireland. They think the Republic of Ireland is part of the United Kingdom, and they think that is what Ireland is today. And I was just talking about, I was like, I can't. And I saw someone else said they're talking about like the IRA being like the government of Northern Ireland. Some American. I was like, what are you even talking about? I was like, what are you even talking about? Like,
there's literally a song about that. Like, come on. I mean, every LARPing Irish person has like played "Come Out You Black and Tans" at least once. Should at least know what they're talking about. I think
even with that. Even with the black and tan stuff. Black and tan stuff is like from like the 1910s.
Yeah. Like they didn't know the
exact
time.
It's from like the 1990s.
Yeah, like it's been adapted so much. And I wrote a bit of excuse me, sorry. I wrote like about some of this in one of my classes a couple semesters ago, and how, at least in America, the Irish identity was kind of broken off from when they left Ireland, and when they started moving in the 1960s into suburbia and away from that urban, very strong knit Irish American communities, they lost a lot of that sense of the Irish identity. So a lot of that history is unfortunately not remembered all that well, which would be interesting to study as a matter of historical memory, because a lot of people will say they're proud to be Irish, and it's a lot of corporatism selling a lot of the stuff, but at the same time there's not a lot of discussions. But since you've talked about how a lot of news anchors and commenters tend to just be generally informative, what would you like to see from American media as it relates to how they cover other countries? Because a lot of times, at least in my experience, American news companies don't cover other countries unless they're either being bombed, flooded, or being sent help by the Americans. There's not a lot of that discussion about like international law, the United Nations Security Council, or how, technically speaking, the UN Charter is something that is technically law under the U.S. Constitution. There's not a lot of discussion surrounding that.
Yeah, it's a hard one, because I did this in history. I don't know if Edward Said is like, I always say when I reference him, I'm the poli-sci basic bitch, because Edward Said Orientalism is something like everyone has to study in politics. I did do it in history as well, but basically he talks about in the 1890s in Britain, there were people who came back from Egypt as, people, officials in Egypt, and they would talk about the Egyptians, write books about the Egyptians. Egyptians are lazy. Egyptians are trying to scam you. And then they write books, and then that becomes everyone's knowledge of what Egypt is. And because there's no Egyptian, like prominent Egyptian author who's going to come to the UK and say, actually, here's my book about what Egypt's really like, that is still so relevant today in terms of US news media, British news media, entertainment as well. So a games journalist called Tamar Hussein came out and said, the way we're showing the Middle East is that it's in perpetual conflict and it's not normal. And I actually, ages ago, I made a video about SnapMap. I don't know if you ever used SnapMap on Snapchat.
Oh, Snapchat. Yeah, we have that.
Have you used have you slid across and used SnapMap?
Oh, yeah.
Where you can go to other countries. And I said that it's such a good app because you'll go into like Somalia, to like Palestine, to loads of random African countries and seeing just like life as normal, life as you can kind of identify with, even though it may be quite different to you. But I think in American media, it's like it's like everywhere but America is like a different planet. Like, I don't know if you're aware of this popular thing about the UK, that the UK is just so riddled with knife crime, you're just gonna get stabbed. You gotta be scared of being stabbed.
Oh, I've heard that one.
There's no go areas everywhere, because we have quite a high Muslim population compared to the US. Like, I think we have more Muslims live in the UK despite being a fifth of the size of the US. So it's like Sharia law, we're ruled by Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, who's Muslim, and shit like that. So it's like Americans, their views of everywhere is so weird. And also, one thing I'd like to see in terms of like Western politics, especially European politics, political trends, and analyzing them better. Like, socialism is not scary to Europeans. Socialism, like in Greece, you have like communist parties. In Spain, it's ruled by like a socialist government, like coalition government at the moment. UK has a Labour Party where people actually call themselves socialists and stuff. And then you have that like button heads with like more the far right populism in France, Spain, Greece, and stuff like that. But to the US, I don't know how, if Americans knew how normal these politics were, in that they were mainstream political parties. Like, you can call yourself the Communist Party. It's not what they're called, but you can call yourself basically the Communist Party of so and so, and you can have political power. And it's not that you've got to be, centrist and center right or everything like that. And also, I think the damage it does to the American discourse is that someone was saying in my comments that Ben Shapiro is a center right conservative. And if you know like about real politics, like global politics, Ben Shapiro is like far right. The mainstream Republican Party is far right. There is no way you can look at their policies and their rhetoric and say that is a center-right party, or even like a traditional conservative party. It's not like Gerald Ford's Republican Party, or even going back to Nixon. There's just no attempt to be subtle.
It's not Eisenhower anymore either. It's just completely like out of the window.
And make no mistake, obviously these guys were extremely racist and problematic, Nixon especially, but there was like an attempt to try and hide it, and that is like what you kind of still have in like our conservative party in the UK. With the US, it's so mask off, it's so just like, we are the racists, vote for us please, and that is like a winning strategy for them. And that's why, Ben Shapiro, when I hear what he says, I'm like, well, this is meant to be like an intellectual titan for one thing, but what he's saying is so radical that in any other country, he would be like kind of pushed to the fringe. Like, if you remember in the UK, he comes on and talks to
Andrew Neil, I love that interview.
Pretty hard, someone who loves Margaret Thatcher, really is no friend to leftist people, talks about woke culture ruining everything, comes on, gets absolutely destroyed because this guy is like a traditional, like normal conservative, and you're like a far right talking head. So you start calling him a leftist because that's how far you've gone over there. But that's what the problem is in American discourse, is that even calling Joe Biden a socialist, it
makes no sense.
What is wrong? Yeah, it makes no sense by all meanings of the word, of the political landscape. And even someone like AOC, even though she's progressive, she's not calling herself a socialist, and she doesn't seem as radical as, maybe someone like Jeremy Corbyn or something. She's not calling for the nationalization of various industries all the time. That's not like a key thing of hers. She has done some good work with that sort of stuff in the past. But that's what the problem is. If you're so ignorant of the outside world and the outside world's politics, then you are going to normalize this stuff where like you'll just vote for Republican because your family do it. And that's like a normal thing. And even though they have the most hateful policies, gerrymandering, just general racism and bigotry, you think it's normal to just tell people, oh yeah, I vote Republican.
Or they harass
not
people
that
at
it's
their
like
office.
Well, yeah, but exactly. But in the UK, if someone tells you, oh yeah, I voted, we used to have something called the BNP. I voted BNP, but like, what the hell's wrong with you? I remember one of my friends voted for UKIP. We were like, what is wrong with you? Like, are you brain dead or something? Like, we know you're not like a massive racist, but we're really getting suspect over you now.
Yeah.
In America, it should be shameful to vote for Republican because that's how off the deep end they've gone. But it's normalized, like, and that's the damage with not knowing about international politics, is that Jeremy Corbyn and stuff must be just scary Stalinist, or even like the government in Spain and stuff. But then to you, like, Joe Biden is a socialist and you guys are the centrists, freedom loving centrists. Like, it makes absolutely no sense. But I think that's the way just general American discourse could be better. But of course, there's a reason that isn't highlighted, because the people who control the discourse often are the people who prop up the powerful, who are conservative Republicans.
Well, I would also think that part of the issue lies in the fact that with the Reagan, like the Reagan wing of the Republican Party, kind of convinced, and Reagan himself was initially seen as a crazy person by the contemporary Republican Party early on. But once he began appealing to this idea that the government can never be a force for good, it's only an interference, it was inevitably tied to this idea to race issues, because they had to chip away at the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It became a major issue because the very act of having a Civil Rights Act, at least in my opinion, is counterintuitive to their belief system that the government is intruding on everything, and therefore that intrusion and coercion is itself amoral. And I think that's part of the reason I have a problem with libertarians. It's like, no, the government can do things that are actually legitimate. But I also think a lot of times there's some mythology, I think, that goes back to even the way we talk about history. So I don't know if you're familiar with some of the ways in which Americans talk about George Washington's view on Europe, how he would talk about, like, don't get entangled with European alliances. And I think there's this element still in the United States that views outside politics as an entanglement rather than something we have always had an influence in. I mean,
yeah,
the infrastructure of the United Nations post-World War II was partially what's our influence. We played a major role in helping to establish that institution. And yet, a lot of Americans seem to believe anytime that there's discussion about international law, why should we care? And I've had numerous conversations with people who, and I don't know if you saw the conversation I had with this person on Twitter. I don't know if it's still up or not. But this person said, abolish the United Nations. And who would enforce that? So I think some of it's multifaceted. But just to get to on a similar note of, responsibility to deal with international affairs, I'm curious about how, like, you've talked about Israel a lot and how a lot of commentators are not doing enough, particularly celebrities, David Pakman. But I'm curious what you would like to see as the desired outcome, like the ideal outcome, not necessarily the realistic one, but the ideal outcome you would see in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Yeah, that's a hard one, because I always talk about on my channel is like, to condemn this stuff, you don't have to have the solution. I mean, it's so complicated in terms of, like, the thing with international relations is you need willing actors. So in the 1980s, you had people in Egypt and Israel who were willing to compromise to get this peace deal between them, which Jimmy Carter helped get through. But we just don't have that anymore. Like, and what also is happening is because the Arab countries are selling out the Palestinians by making more alliances with the Americans and Israel, and Saudi Arabia is helping facilitate this as well. It's just a lot of people getting more hard lines. So in the short term, I would like international sanctions on Israel. Now, I don't generally think sanctions really work, but we're talking about like a highly developed, rich country here. We're not talking about Venezuela or like post-Gulf War Iraq or something. So I think just to show Israel they cannot do this and just get away with it. But the problem is, because of the way the UN is designed, the US has disproportionate influence, so they're banning the UN from even calling for a ceasefire at the moment.
Yeah.
And that's just, sick shit that the US is doing. But I would like, obviously, ceasefire. I would like, Gaza to have a lot of international aid agencies. I'd love the, rich countries to help. I know they won't because it's such a contentious issue. Help rebuild it and help develop it. I'd also love an end to like the really harsh border restrictions and stuff. Just make it. Ideally, like what a lot of people who compromise say is that the borders should go back to how they used to be. Before the 1967 like land grab after the war and everything, and end to settler colonialism and evictions and everything. But yeah, I think you're asking me a question that's kind of like impossible to answer right now, because obviously, what is the answer there? But I guess the answer in the short term is stop what you're doing now, stop the settler colonialism. All recent evictions must be, and I don't know how far you go back because it's not not my job. I don't know enough about the eviction issue to do this, but like stop the recent evictions, overturn everything that's been happening lately, and let Gaza and stuff have access to these things. And the main thing is the Israelis themselves need to get Netanyahu out of power, because it hurts them too. And you're talking, people are like to say, well, what about the Israelis who died? Well, yeah, if you care about that, why do you support what they're doing right now? It's counterintuitive. If you bomb people who live in poor conditions, you kill their family, and then you have a group like Hamas being like, we are the ones who stand up for you, we're going to fight back. What do you think's going to happen? What do you think that orphan's going to do? That 14-year-old without his parents and family anymore, 15-year-old boy. Do you think he's going to go live in the street? Or do you think he might join a militant group that will provide for him, give him the power to fight back? It's like with anything, like it's in Afghanistan, it's Iraq. It doesn't, and Vietnam, the US, just like Israel, thought they could win by just bombing these people into submission. More bombs dropped in Vietnam than bombs dropped in the entire of World War II. What did the Vietnamese do?
They
Millions
took to
and
the
millions
tunnels.
die. Yeah, but they just kept fighting, because you're just not, when a people, whether it's Palestine or Vietnamese, when they have such a strong national identity and they've suffered so much, you're not going to win through this oppression as much as you try. Like the Vietnamese people and Palestinians have dealt with this for so long, and you think that's going to stop them. So that's the thing, Netanyahu needs to go. And I wish, and I think they're trying to do this. This is why he's trying to stay in power longer. The other parties need to form a coalition to get him out, and then hopefully, just. Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, what can like my answer be? Because I think about what I'd want personally. Like you're saying, that doesn't really matter what I want.
It's what they want.
This issue, yeah. But I said to someone today, Israel is in such a position of power; it can do whatever it wants. If it wants peace, it can make peace. But what I'm worried about now is, unlike the 1990s, where there actually was a push with the PLO and the Israelis for this two-state solution, a secular Palestine, but because of people like Netanyahu and what he's unleashed and this growing far-right populism, and because of what they've been doing over the last like 7 or 8 years, I feel like the people in Gaza and stuff, and you make them more militant, they might not accept what you offer them. Again, like you're asking me this, what I would want in one of the most complicated issues, because that's what I always say. It's not complicated to condemn what's going on right now. What's right or wrong. It's very complicated if you live in like a realistic world for the solution, because you've got to deal with the Israeli government, one of the most powerful countries in the region, backed by not only the US, also the UK, and to a less extent countries like France as well, and also weird ties to some Russians as well, like the guy who owns Chelsea, what's his name, Abramovich and stuff. And then you have even countries that used to be for the Palestinians, like Saudi Arabia, getting cozy with Israel. So what we actually get is probably not going to appeal to anyone. But yeah, it's just, all I would say on the issue, if anyone's wondering, is Israel built its country a very similar way into which the US and like Canada built theirs. And what is happening if you need a good comparison, think about Native Americans in America or Canada. Think about maybe if you want a more, if you can't relate to that, white people, Ireland, what the British did to the Catholic Irish and stuff. And then think about that in the context of Israel. But also think about in terms of, if you want to compare it to Northern Ireland, could you imagine Hydra jets from the British Army leveling tower blocks of Belfast Catholics in the 1980s and 90s? And you can't imagine that. And maybe ask yourself why you can't imagine that. And maybe ask yourself, if you're okay with that happening to the Palestinians, why would you be okay with that? And would you be okay if the same thing happened to Catholic Irish in Belfast? And I probably will think your answer will be, you wouldn't be okay with that happening to Belfast. So why are you okay with it happening to like the Palestinians?
Yeah, and I think part of the issue, and you brought it up earlier, is at least in it goes back to what I brought up earlier. Some of it, I think, is Americans seem to believe like it's only when conflict breaks out that this becomes an issue. It's only when the violence breaks out and people start getting bombed that Americans tend to pay attention. But I also think the other issue is that Hamas has a vested interest in maintaining its authority over some of these groups of people by virtue of saying we're the ones who will protect you. And you brought this up earlier. So in terms of what the international community, particularly the United States, can do to deal with that, what do you think we could see? And I know some of these questions are kind of difficult to answer because, things are constantly fluid. But what would you like to see from the international community to sort of deal with the radicalization, not just of Palestinians, but of the Israeli right too?
Yeah. So in terms of Hamas was elected by Gaza, and then Gaza ousted the PLO in a short civil war afterwards. So, and even Palestinian Christians voted for Hamas.
Yeah.
And that's not because Palestinian Christians love Islamic fundamentalism and Islamic terrorism. They definitely do not. It's because these guys felt like the PLO had sold them out to the West and sold them out to Israel. And when you create these, the thing is, it's just with Islamic extremism, something you see throughout the globe is you got a couple different things, but when people are desperate, they will do, whatever. And I think the Islamic extremism is just a cover for a lot of times, and it helps the US frame the stuff that's going on in Israel as like an extension of the war on terror, essentially. Hamas is like Al-Qaeda. It's Islamic terrorism. And if you try and dissect the reasons why they exist, well, you're just an apologist for terrorism. Whereas, with the IRA, let's say, for example, the IRA won in the Republic of Ireland, they make a state. They're not terrorists anymore, but people don't say like, oh, crazy IRA, because they made a country for themselves. Yeah. But with Hamas's case, we like to talk about the Islamic element of it, not the more nationalist element of it, where these guys are, Islamic extremists. They have an awful manifesto. They talk about killing all the Jews, not just Israelis. They talk about killing all the Jews. Really awful shit. But they weren't created because of like Islamic, extremism just popped up one day. It's a response. And the reason they got popular is because of what Israel done to them. So in my mind, to take out support for that, you've got to stop, bombing them, obviously, stop making the conditions so awful. Now, in terms of, that's just pretty simple, but it's more complicated because, this stuff, even if, say something miraculous happened, Netanyahu was gone, aid workers from around the world and foreign actors to Gaza to help rebuild and maybe less restrictions were on its borders and everything like that. That could all happen, but there's still people in there who will be permanently destroyed by what has just happened in the last couple of weeks, like families gone. And they're not going to be satisfied with this stuff. That's not going to, with Iraq, for example, a lot of Iraqis said, thanks US for getting rid of Saddam, now you get out. And then when the US didn't get out, you had a broad coalition of various different ethnic groups and religions all attacking the Western forces. This wasn't just, we like to frame it as Al-Qaeda or just ex-Saddam Hussein militants. It was Shia militias who hated Saddam Hussein, who were oppressed by Saddam Hussein. They started attacking the US as well. And that's what I fear will happen. It's just been seen like as an extension of like trying to have some sort of appeasement, like, oh, forget what Israel did to you and come join the international community. I don't think that will work so much. But in terms of the Israeli right, obviously it feels like nothing, because I think what happens with Israel is we don't think about it in terms of, I don't think it's democracy, obviously, but it has a system that is familiar to Western countries where the rulers can change through elections. But I think the US doesn't really care about that. They just care about, like, we back Israel. We don't back Netanyahu, we back Israel. If it's Netanyahu or someone else, it doesn't matter. We back them. And I think that's the problem, because I wouldn't say the US would do that for every single country, although I do feel like it would do it for most. Like, they're still friends with Modi, and, I don't see him as any different to Netanyahu or Putin, but they they'll back Modi, even though he was banned from coming to the US for like years. But that's just how international politics works for a country like America.
Yeah.
So I'd say that's why it's so disappointing. Americans are like, I voted for Joe Biden doesn't mean I voted for what's going on right now. Well, if you were more conscious, a Jewish candidate for president was calling the prime minister of Israel racist. This is a guy who wasn't, even if you like Israel, he wasn't demonizing Israelis and Israel. He was talking about the government. So there's your compromise. A guy who has nuance when it comes to this issue, wants the guy out, doesn't like him, and, like Bernie's been saying, doesn't want to sell them weapons. That's who you could have had. And it means, like, I guess for the Americans in general, which is a problem with Americans in general, like we were outlining before, you need more of an international consciousness where foreign policy does matter. And people always say to me, shut up, Brit, it's American politics. Why does it matter? We're seeing why it matters. People are trying to condemn Israel and call for a ceasefire in the UN. The only country blocking that is the US.
Yep.
That's why it matters. The US have a disproportionate amount of control in the IMF, the World Bank, the UN. It literally is probably one of the most sophisticated empires in the world, in that it doesn't actually have to conquer every country. It doesn't actually have to have, total control and occupation of every country to have an absolutely huge influence on nearly every country in the entire world. If the US doesn't like you, you're out of the international community. Cuba, Iran, North Korea and stuff. Obviously, all had their problems, but does the US really have any moral high ground on Cuba? Of course they don't. It's because the US don't like them. So it's just a very frustrating thing. And I feel like, can America do anything with someone like Joe Biden in charge, this centrist guy? If Bernie Sanders was in charge, of course I'd be more hopeful. And I'd understand probably the US would be calling for the ceasefire. At the very least, that's the bare minimum. But then here are a wing of the Democratic Party that are calling for sanctions. And that's why, if you're an American who really cares about this stuff, you got to vote at a more local level sometimes before getting to the presidency, where your choice is, here's Joe Biden with his Secretary of State, who has proudly said that the US has ignored UN war crimes charges on Israel, has been the country to override them. He said that in an APAC conference, like, unbelievable. And then in terms of the Israeli policy, you're not even getting going back to Obama, who was way more harsh than the Israelis. Obviously not great still, but him and Netanyahu did not get on. Now you got Biden, who seems to just be doing what Trump did, but less, because even like with the Iran stuff, where's the Iran nuclear deal? Where's the new one? We're just not going to do that anymore, because he's continuing Trump's policy. So I don't see any hope for it at the moment. And I feel like when Netanyahu de-escalates this, global focus on Palestine and the US's role in Palestine will sort of diminish. And I feel like you're saying, a lot of Americans don't care about this stuff anyway. Americans will go back to not caring about this stuff.
Yeah, I think just to push back on the Iran nuclear deal just a bit, not too much. My understanding is that the Iranians are a bit pissed at the United States for pulling out in the first place, so they're making more demands than the Biden administration expected. So they're kind of struggling to come to a deal. But I do think the Biden administration wants to at least get on that. But I do agree overall with your take on Biden and Israel, particularly because during his campaign he was talking about Israel in the same light that you usually heard about that. Just one last question on a little bit of a lighter note. What's up with the chocolate oranges? What started that?
Yeah, so I guess it's a weird one. So basically, I always just have random shit in the background. Sometimes it'd be like 4 cans of Monster, or like just random, or random just different like sweet stuff. And then I think, I don't remember when I got the white ones, because for example, these white ones are like quite exclusive. They were limited edition, and I think My girlfriend's family bought me a couple because they know I like chocolate oranges anyway. And then I started stacking in the back of my video, and then I think in my first video that blew up this year, which really set me on the path to like getting a lot of a bigger audience, someone said, I love there's just random chocolate oranges in the back. And then I just thought, like, I think someone said on stream, like, it should be for every so many subs or something. And then I don't remember when I started this, maybe in February, I just said for every 5K, we'll get a new chocolate orange. So then now it's like a good indicator. But the bad thing is, because obviously I'm leaving them out, and not that they're melting, but they probably don't taste so great just being left out in a room that will obviously like vary in temperature as the day goes through. So I probably won't be eating them, although I have promised if I get to 100K I'll melt them down and like make some sort of like weird like extremely high calorie broth.
That totally won't like kill you or something, right?
well the thing is, the sell by date is most of them is 28th of December 2021. So we're probably not going to hit 100K by then. So I don't know what's going to happen. Might just have to like buy some new ones and like them to replace the old ones so I don't like poison myself.
Yeah, that would be bad.
But yeah, basically just a tradition I got into, and then no, I can't really stop.
I'll just have a collection of Dr. Pepper cans behind me, or books, because I got way too many books and I don't have enough bookshelves for that. But
I used to do the books. But chocolate oranges are better.
Yeah, they probably you can eat those. I mean, you could try to eat a book, but it wouldn't probably taste all that well. Probably not the wisest thing to do with your historical sources.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for coming on. It was a pleasure having you. You were very good. I really appreciate it. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
No, just thank you for having me on. If anyone, because hopefully I promoted this on my stuff and you're watching on YouTube, so I tell anyone who's doing that, a couple of days later, subscribe to Progressive American, right?
Yeah, the Progressive American.
Okay. And check out Connor's social stuff and Twitter and everything, and
I'll share it in the chat.
Follow him. You guys all shared a lot of support for my stuff on Bitemark, so hopefully you enjoyed this and you subscribe as well. And yeah, that's basically it. I'm if any of your followers see this, just Kavernacle, just type it in, and there's lots of different stuff. Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, WordPress, Medium page, Reddit, everything like that. If you just type in the Kavernacle, very unique name, it's just going to be me.
Alrighty, thank you very much.